Have you ever wanted to do beautiful in-grain inlaid cutting boards with your CNC, but don't really know where to start? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna show you why you don't need 20 years of experience to get started with a step-by-step guide. So whether you're an absolute beginner or a seasoned veteran, there is a ton of tips and tricks in this video. Let's get started. So before we start, let me explain what an inlay is and then the two different types of inlay you can do with the CNC. So an inlay is just taking one type of material and putting it inside of another type of material and surfacing it off and making it flush. So you can do an inlay with rocks or epoxy, but in our case today, we're gonna be doing it with different types of wood. And so for the woodworker in you, you take some walnut, you put it in some maple, you surface it off, and that is an inlay. Now there are two different types of inlays that you can do with the CNC. One is the complicated version that you probably hope to aspire to one day, and that's going to be the V-carve or the V-bit method of doing an inlay. And what it does is you use some type of a V-bit, whether it's a 60, a 90, a 30, or those really, really tight spirally ones that you see. And that allows you to get hyper intricate designs that some of these bigger YouTubers do, and it makes these crazy designs. It looks crazy hard, and honestly, it's a little bit overwhelming. So we're not gonna focus on this one today. What we're gonna focus on is the one that I got started with, that I have done a ton of projects with, and that's gonna be a straight flute inlay, or a straight bit inlay. And all you do with that is you just make a pocket inside of whatever piece you're gonna do, and then you cut the piece straight and it sits down in there. The drawback from making these is that you can't get as detailed as that V-carve because you don't have an angle to get to a point. You just have whatever radius of whatever bit you're doing. And so if you're only using a 1/4 inch bit, you can only get a 1/4 inch corner, a 1/4 inch radiused corner in there. And so you can't do hyper detailed work. Now the plus on it though is that it's super easy, like 10 times faster, and it doesn't hurt your brain while looking at it. And it still makes beautiful, beautiful art. And so that's what we're gonna be doing today. We're gonna be doing a straight inlay and not the V-carve inlay. I will make videos in the future on how to do a V-carve inlay, but once again, we're doing the KISS method today. So with that being said, let's talk about our material. So the material we're using today is walnut and maple. Walnut is gonna be our male insert piece that's gonna be inlaid into the maple base. These two boards are 12 inches by 18 inches. The walnut piece is 0.6 inches thick, and the maple board is 1.7 inches thick. And if you're wondering why they're shrink wrapped, this is a kit that CIC Workshop just launched to make it easy for you to make in-grain cutting boards, so you don't have to spend a whole weekend getting to this point and spend a whole bunch of money on drum sanders and all the other equipment necessary to get to this point. So with that being said, I'm gonna take this shrink wrap off and get started with these cutting boards. Let's go. It's like unwrapping a present on Christmas morning. Now, let's get our centers marked so everything is exactly perfect. So we got the boards unwrapped, we checked them, they're nice and flat, nice and straight. So now we just gotta figure out what we want to inlay and start programming. Let's go. All right guys, let's get to programming. So I set up in a 12 by 18 inch block right here, the same size as our cutting boards. And personally, I'm just gonna do a giant letter, and since my last name starts with a D, I'm gonna do a D. My favorite font to use is Century, and I like to bold it. And so that's gonna be the letter we're going to inlay into this cutting board. Now I'm gonna set my size at 10 inches because the board is 12 inches tall, and I want 1 inch of gap between each side right there. And so this is our letter that we are going to inlay into this cutting board. Now to make the male insert part, I like to flip over whatever I'm programming, because whenever you cut this out, you want the best end to go in that female part first. And the top side is gonna be the best side because the bottom side may have frizzies, it may have tabs, etc. So I always like to flip it over. And since we have that walnut piece, I don't necessarily wanna use the whole entire thing, so I'm gonna put the D to the side over here. So very basic. Now, we're going to do the straight male insert part right here, and we're gonna cut all the way through the material using an 1/8 inch bit. And I'm gonna use an 1/8 inch down cut bit, and I'm gonna go down to 4 passes with this bit, and I'm going to set my feed rate at 100 inches a minute
and my plunge rate at 50. And I'm not gonna use any tabs on this. I'll tell you why later in the video. Now I'm gonna add a simple ramp, and that is it. And it's going to cut out this. Now once again, notice it automatically rounded these edges right here. So it's gonna cut those edges and automatically round them because you're using this inlay toolpath. But that's roughly it. That's all you have to do.
So the bit that I'm gonna be using to cut out this male insert piece is an 1/8 inch down cut bit. And the reason I'm doing a down cut is because whenever it cuts this out, it's going to keep all the chips inside of the board itself for the most part. And that's actually gonna have so many chips in there that none of the pieces are gonna move. So a lot of people cut this out, they put tabs, they have to come back and cut out the tabs because they use an upcut bit and stuff like that. This is why I like using downcut bits, because you're gonna see it in here, it's gonna cut all the way through and that piece isn't gonna move at all because there's so many chips holding everything in place. The second thing to note is that this is only a 1/2 inch cutting length, and I'm cutting all the way through a 0.6 inch piece. And so a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, right? It's only 0.5 and you're cutting through 0.6. Well, there is a little bit of taper right here where you can go past. Now I don't want to go up into here on this part of the bit, but there is this taper right here that I can actually go past it 1/10 of an inch and the bit's not gonna break and it's not gonna rub and nothing is gonna catch on fire. So those are two little quick notes as I get this clamp down to really think about. Now while I'm doing the male cutout first over pocketing the maple is because I like to have the male done with, and whenever I pocket out this one, if something is not right, I can check it with the male piece. So a lot of times you do this one first and you take it off and you cut out the other parts and the parts don't fit. Then you have to sand the other parts and keep sanding them. This way, you can then cut out the part, right? Already have it done. And when you pocket this board, you can check if it fits. And then if it doesn't fit, you just make your pocket a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and you don't have to do any sanding at all. That's a pro tip that I learned the hard way multiple times. So do your male part first if possible. Let's cut out this D. And so like I said, notice as it's cutting, all of those chips are staying in there, okay? And so this D is not shifting around because the compact chips from that downcut bit are keeping everything in place. Now there is some escaping, but it's not a lot, and this middle piece doesn't even move, even though it's already cut out. And so it's just really cool and a little pro tip that I highly advise you use. All right, so we got this D cut out. What's so cool about this is that, like, even now, okay, this is how compact it is. Look, it's literally stuck, and I used no double-sided tape because it cut all the way through and has these little tiny trenches or ridges from that bit, and those chips are in there. So even just cutting all the way through, it is holding itself in there because of that little ridge that it left. Like, that's the power of a downcut bit. And so you see it's cut all the way out everywhere, and all I have to do is just punch it out. And that's how tight all those chips are.
So there's two different toolpaths we can use to inlay this cutting board. We have the inlay toolpath or the pocket and profile method. The only difference is that with the inlay toolpath, if you have V-Carve Pro, it's gonna automatically round over these edges, because let's just say you have a 1/4 inch bit, it can't go all the way to the corners. And so the inlay toolpath right here is automatically gonna adjust those corners for you. But if you don't have an inlay toolpath, all you have to do is come over here and just radius these edges. And in order to radius these edges, you're gonna have to convert this D to a curve, and then you can come in here and radius these edges, and you're gonna get the same exact effect as that inlay toolpath. Now, if you have more complicated stuff, that's where the inlay toolpath is really nice, but for this simple letter, I can easily just go in there and radius those edges. But I'm gonna undo all that to show you how this inlay toolpath works. And so the first thing we're gonna do in program is the female part, and so we're just gonna do a pocket, and I'm gonna go 3/8 of an inch deep, and I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch bit to do the clearing out and an 1/8 inch bit to do the fine detail. So we're only going to do one pass with that 1/4 inch bit going 3/8 of an inch deep, and I'm running it at 150 inches a minute and 75 on the plunge rate. That 1/8 inch bit we're going to set to 2 passes, and I'm gonna run that at 110 inches a minute and 55 on the plunge rate. I'm also gonna include a ramp in here at 1/2 inch. And this last thing right here is probably the most important step. So believe it or not, you cannot cut the same exact thing and it's gonna fit. You actually need a little bit of an allowance. So this pocket allowance right here, I'm gonna put 2/1000ths of an inch allowance on this female pocket. So it's gonna make that D just slightly bigger, and then the male insert is gonna fit into there. If you did them the same, the male insert will not fit. So how this looks is that 1/4 inch bit is gonna come and clear everything out, and that 1/8 inch bit is gonna come and do the very fine detail work. Right here in the corner, you can see barely right there in the corner, and then right here along the edge. You can't really see it, but it's just gonna take off a little bitty bit. You can kind of see it right there. And so that is how to set up the female portion of this. So just make sure you use that pocket allowance, and the reason I'm going 3/8 of an inch deep is because I can. You can do a 1/4 inch, you can do a 1/2 inch, whatever you want to do.
So as we get this held down as well, like I said in previous videos, I like to keep little blocks of wood everywhere for bracing purposes. And so that is now held down. So for this female pocket, I am going to use a 1/4 inch bit to clear out all the material, then come back with an 1/8 inch bit to do all the fine details. You can use really any bit you want. You can use an upcut, a downcut, a roughing bit, whatever, because whenever I'm cutting ingrained, this is me personally, I've never actually seen an upcut have any tear out because the way the grain is, right? So it's just cutting and there's no real grain to actually like tear out. And so you can use an upcut on end grain and it's not gonna mess anything up. So I'm gonna put a golden boy in there to do all this clearing out. It's gonna do it in one pass. So another reason I'm using this golden boy roughing bit right here is because it is the best bit in the whole entire world. There's no other bits like it. This one is far superior. Everybody else sucks. Just kidding. You could easily use a straight flute bit, but I do sell golden boys on cscworkshop.com. So I got an 1/8 inch down cut in there. It's just gonna come around and take a little bit off the edges and do that tiny detail work in the corners right there of that D. All right, so just vacuumed it off. Got my piece. We're gonna dry fit it real quick to see if it works. And once again, if it doesn't, the board is still in place and I can just reprogram it and make that pocket a little bit bigger, okay? But it should work because we had that 0.002 of a tolerance on there. So it should fit snug as a bug on a rug. And it does, and I'm not gonna put it all the way in there because it may not come out, because it is an extremely snug fit. But that's what we want. And once again, if it didn't fit, I can just go reprogram it. Super easy. And now that we know it fits, it dry fits, everything went in nice and snug, now it's time to get it glued up. That's what I sound like after my morning coffee. You want to put as much glue as possible because any glue that doesn't go in the thing will get squeezed out. Once it's in there, there are a ton of different ways you can clamp this. What I like to do, in my personal favorite way of gluing this up, is I put it up on some little blocks, like so. You can need to take some plywood. I have this giant metal plate right here, this 1/2-inch thick steel plate. Most of y'all don't have this laying around, but if you have like a piece of plywood or something like that, that's what I would use. And then you just stick it on top, and then I'm gonna put some clamps around it. Now, I will say, make sure if you're doing it with plywood, put wax paper or some type of paper over that plywood, because that glue is gonna stick to the plywood. Then you're gonna have plywood also stuck to the cutting board, also stuck to the inlay. You don't want that to happen. So that's why I use metal, because glue doesn't stick to metal. But yeah, there you go. Okay, see all that glue squeezing out? That's a good thing. Squeezing out on all the sides, and so you don't have to worry about over gluing. Now, because I need to speed up this video, I did that last night and I already have one ready, but I did the same exact process to it. So imagine this dries. I like to do it overnight for about 24 hours. So I did this one last night at about 8 p.m. and right now it's 3 p.m. So it's been drying almost 24 hours. So now this one is good to start surfacing. And this one I'm gonna set to the side and get to it tomorrow. So let's surface this one off and get with it.
So to surface this cutting board, I made a 12.5 by 18.5 inch rectangle, and I'm gonna go down 0.04 inches with a 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm gonna do a 90-degree raster angle with a slight plunge. And what this is gonna do, it's going to slowly surface that cutting board top just like this from right to left, and gonna make very quick work of that board to create a nice clean surface. My step over that I'm gonna set is 72%. You can go 80%, you can go 40%. I have not really seen a difference. And I'm actually gonna set this at 200 inches a minute and 100 on my plunge rate. And so there you go. That is how we're gonna surface the top of this cutting board.
So to clamp these down, I've just made some wedges out of some old wood that I found. And so I took a board, cut a little slice out of it. So we got everything together. It's not moving, and we officially wedged this cutting board together with 2 wedges. So I wedged my cutting board. Now it's time to surface it off. Let's go. All right, so it worked really good. I'm gonna take out these wedges real quick. And as you can see, it's like perfectly surfaced. And so all I really need to do is just sand this side a little bit. But I wanna do a little bit more to this board. And so we're gonna put some handles on the back side. And so to do that, I grab the cutting board like this, like I would. And then I'm gonna measure how far my fingers stuck out, which is about 2 inches. And then I'm gonna go about 1/4 inch past that. And so I want my hand holes to be about 2 1/4, 2.5 inches deep. So let's just say 2.5, just in case my fingers get stuck underneath there more. And how deep I'm gonna do it is about 1/2 inch deep, because that's how far my fingers squeeze right there. So I'm gonna make a handle spot about 2.5 inches up and about 1/2 inch deep. And I'll show you how I'll program that right now.
All right, now it's time to make handles for this cutting board. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a 5-inch diameter circle, because my fingers went up those 2.5 inches. We're gonna get it all square. And I'm just gonna come to this edge over here and center it up in the edge, just about like that. That's all I'm gonna do. Now that I got it centered, I'm going to connect a line from here to here, just because I need a little bit extra space. I'm gonna cut that, and cut that. And then you have this nice little handle part right here. And then what I'm gonna do is just flip it and then drag it way over here and adjust it till it looks about right. And once again, this is no rocket science. And so now that's what we have. Now we're gonna come over here, I'm gonna take those two, and I'm just gonna do a simple pocket toolpath, a 1/2 inch deep with that 1/4 inch end mill. And I'm gonna be cutting at, let's bring it down to 150 inches a minute, 75 on the plunge rate. I'm gonna pocket down a 1/2 inch deep. I'm gonna add that profile pass last and do that. And that's all it's gonna do. And that's roughly how I pocket those out. Very simple, just a 1/2 circle connecting with the line. And the reason I did that line there is so the bit can kind of overextend over the edge and make sure we don't have any little frizzies or anything like that sticking up. So that's how I do the handles. Just a simple circle connected on both sides. That's it. Let's go.
Now, if you are getting value from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We do have some exciting news coming up in future videos, so please subscribe, hit that notification bell, because this tank is coming soon. Check the link in the description if you're interested. All right, so those handles look really good. They're gonna work perfectly fine. We're gonna sand and oil this down and then put some little feet on the back, put my brand, all of that good stuff. And then once we get it sanded and oiled, we'll talk about how long this should actually take you and any additional tips that I have for you if you wanna try this out on your own. Let's go. So to sand this cutting board down, I'm gonna start with 120 grit to take off all those lines and then come back with 180 grit. And remember that these kits are sanded down to 180 grit in our shop, and so the back is not gonna take near as much sanding, and neither are the sides, to get this thing nice and slick feeling. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these little feet on. I like these feet to go on the cutting boards. That way it elevates them. Just in case they ever do warp, it's still gonna lay flat on the countertop even if it bowls just a little bit. My fingers fit underneath it perfectly to pick up the board. So the total time it took to make this ingrained inlay cutting board was about an hour. It took me 20 minutes to program, cut out, and pocket, and an additional 40 minutes to surface it all off, sand it, and put the finishing touches on it. And so in 1 hour, I was able to do this with that kit, which is pretty amazing. Now, you don't have to ever use the kit. You can make it yourself. You're probably looking at about 6 to 8 hours, maximum of about 10 hours of labor in order to get you to this point. Now, this is my very first cutting board I ever did using this kit. I wanted you to be the first to see that. Now, I've done hundreds of other ones, but this is the very first one using the kit. I am super proud of myself, super proud of getting to this point, and I hope to save a ton of y'all thousands and thousands of hours of your weekend if you ever do use this kit. So thank you so much for watching, and remember, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right.